Welcome to the Zelos podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder. This week, Josh Haag is in the house with me. He's a performance coach, CEO, and owner of Heroic Performance. He also happens to be one of the newest Perform Better presenters. So if you're thinking about Perform Better summits this summer, you would be well pressed to get your spot now. Whether it's in Long Beach or Providence, Rhode Island, or Chicago, Illinois. Also, if you're thinking about more continuing education, check out my website, rockysnyder.com. We've got CEU online and in-person workshops that are going on for athletic trainers, physical therapists, personal trainers, strength coaches, and chiropractors. And also this summer, we've got the NSCA National Conference happening. That'll be July 16th to 19th in Kansas City, Missouri. Come join me and a whole bunch of others as we network and present. In the meantime, follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Click that darn subscribe button now and enjoy the show. Well, Josh, I'm so excited to have you on the Zelos podcast. Last year, we met at one of the Perform Better summits, and just, when you meet people at those summits, not only is it great to network with individuals, and it's just a great environment to actually have in-person interaction with people, but every now and then there's somebody you run into, and instantly you're like, whoa, there's this cool connection here. I can't really put my finger on it, but man, this is really cool. And that happened with me to you when we talked at length back in Long Beach last year, or LA, that is. So first, welcome to Zelos. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Rocky. That means a lot. Thank you very, very much. And I can say, both being here as well as talking Perform Better, it's an honor to be getting a chance to sit down with you as someone who has learned from you for years and implements a lot of what you do with the wedges and things like that through the foot. I've been looking forward to this. So thanks for having me.
Right on, man. Well, it's a joy and an honor. And for the listening audience, hey, if you have not been to one of the Perform Better summits that have been going on for like 25 years now, there's this summer, you would do yourself a worse service by not attending. You get the CEUs, but you get to connect with some of the top-notch presenters and minds in our industry, from rehab to return to performance, whether it's Gray Cook and Lee Burton with functional movement, Mike Boyle with his strength coach from Boston area, to guys like ourselves. Now, there's Providence, Rhode Island, Chicago, Illinois, and Long Beach, California. Those three venues are happening this summer. Check it out, performbetter.com, because it blew my mind when I first got there, and I vowed to never let myself take for granted what I thought I knew. And because that first weekend, I realized I knew very little after thinking I knew so much, and it humbled me, and it washed away whatever arrogance I had. And each year I go back to just drink from the fountain, or the fire hydrant, more to the point. But what's really cool, yeah, right? It is.
And I can honestly say, well, before we dive in, I can honestly say when it comes to the lecture series, the summit, Chris always, when he does intros, talks about how this is great, the speakers are great, but it's all about that networking connection. And when I first got there, that first year or two, I've been going for about 10 years. I probably saw you presenting through that time span 5 or 6 times through Perform Better. And realistically, I didn't understand that comment from Chris when I first started. And as I go year after year and start to meet more people and not be afraid to shake hands and get out there. So for anyone listening from the young gun coming up, meet people, shake hands, because you get the chance to talk to someone like Rocky or Alan Cosgrove, right? Lee Burton. You get to shake their hands and get to meet them. These are the top minds in what we do. So it's such a cool experience.
Well, thank you. I mean, it was a joy back in 2019 or whatever, when I finally applied to be a presenter with them, because there's that. Also, we can suffer from the imposter syndrome and think, who am I to be up there and sharing what I do? But after a while, you kind of let that voice put off to the side and go, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. And they only accept a dozen presenters each year out of all of the 70 some odd presenters that are up there at the different venues. They don't have much opportunity. So congratulations for being selected this year, because honestly, that's one of the biggest honors in my career, to be welcomed into the Perform Better family. And it's like the mafia in fitness. Once you're in, there's no getting out, Bubby. You're in.
Like the
there's
mafia.
no leaving.
I love
Truly.
that.
So,
Cool.
what do you give us a sneak peek now? Since we're talking about the summits,
Yep.
you're presenting at Long Beach, and that's going to be
Yep.
happening the middle of July.
Middle of July. Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, I won't be there because I'll be at the NSCA National Conference presenting there. I'd like to be in both places at once, but that's the 16th to the 19th. So I think you guys are going to be the 17th, 18th, and 19th,
Yes,
if
sir.
I'm correct, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So what's the title of your topic?
So realistically, well, you're training the trainer of the next generation, bridging the gap between trainer and therapist. So realistically, I don't know if you knew this, Rocky, but the average lifespan of a coach today in the atmosphere that we live in is about a year to about 18 months, so 12 to 18 months. And the turnover rate is incredibly high. The average pay is incredibly low, right? The average trainer makes between 48 and 55K a year. And basically there's this huge burnout. There's a realization once we get in, there's this like, what's that called, where they pull the blinds over their eyes. You rush in, you love doing fitness. Yeah, I get to help people. And then all of a sudden, a year down the road, you're underpaid, overworked. You're trying to make ends meet. It's this weird dynamic that happens. And what I'm trying to do is come in with this topic and showcase that this is a problem. And whether it's therapists, whether it's chiropractors, whether it's the coaches in the room, we need to find a way to do more. We need to become more. And why can someone like you or a mentor of mine, since you're NSCA, Loren Landow has been a huge influencer in my life. Why can someone like that, Lee Burton, these incredible coaches, how are they able to do it? If we zoom out, because when you go to these summits and lectures, you see incredible knowledge and science-backed things, and you're talking fascial systems and integrative movements, and for you, the foot pathology and what the joint mechanics are doing. But no one zooms back and looks at how you became successful. Why are you successful? And how can you be in this for 10, 15, 20 years? So I wanted to do almost like a more of a bird's eye view. I'm going to incorporate some of the tactical things, but I wanted to do a bird's eye view of like, hey, let's be more for our client. Let's expect more for our coaches if we own the business. And basically, I want to showcase that there is this opportunity afoot to become more than a coach, more than a therapist. And I think what realistically the industry is going to move towards, especially now that you add in what's going on in the healthcare system, the eyes that are on it, what's going on in the government, like the future of our medical system is going to evolve. And we're at this cusping point as coaches that we have the opportunity to be at the forefront of that, taking care of our clients, taking care of our people, like a project coordinator for a house, right? You hire a project coordinator to build the house. You don't just hire a woodworker. You don't just hire an electrician. You hire someone to manage the system. And I believe that's what we're going to become.
That's really interesting. Actually, I never thought of that as a possible position for those in our industry to be the project manager for
That's
health
what
and
you do.
wellness.
I
I know,
guarantee
but
you.
you just don't think about it in that regard. But that's brilliant because
Yep.
that opens up so many opportunities. Okay, just to backtrack a little bit, I I was not aware that it was so paltry of a time frame of 12 to 18 months for new trainers. I was aware that there was a excessive drop off for
Yep.
people entering the industry and then leaving in a really short amount of time. Just historically speaking, in my own business here, we're coming up on 29 years of a brick and mortar. We started in 96 and in March of 96. So next month we're going to be celebrating that kind of little milestone there. But at first I just had renters. They used to be called
Yep.
independent contractors that rented
Yep.
space, but they were just renters. And then somewhere in the 2000s, it was probably about 2007 or so, I hired my first employee. She was a trainer, and
Yep.
she became she was with me for 7 years. She still does training elsewhere, but 7 years she was one of my staff members. And then over time we'd get others, and they would stay with me for 4 years, 5 years, and so on. Josh, brother, I cannot tell you the struggles that we have had post COVID with maintaining staff, with offering as much as we could possibly offer and still maintain a reasonable amount of success as a business. But we're down to 6 months to a year. Like I don't even know where to go now. How much time do I have to devote to bringing people in only for them to leave within a year? So something's got to change.
And I've seen a big part of it is also where I see people leaving is, and you had said, your young lady who had started with you was with you for 7 years. She still trains elsewhere. What I'm also noticing is the people that come through who work with me, when they leave, they're not staying in the industry. They come in,
No.
whether they're green and they're trained up by me, they put through my internship and then they start to see clients, or they're coming in season. It's like a hammer falls that they're just like, I can't do this anymore. So it's frustrating to see, as what I would say, a young expert. I've been at this now over a decade. Like, I'm trying to be you one day, and there's got to be a solution, or the industry will fall apart as a whole. So my hope is to take a step forward in this lecture, and through Perform Better, to reach some minds, to get people to think differently. We have to, or we will die as a whole.
Well, I think a part of that in regards to the population that we are addressing is different than what a lot of the associations are training us to
Well
be
said.
addressing. So the personal trainer programs and certifications and strength conditioning are geared toward a younger population than
Mhm.
we're typically seeing, one that has not damaged their bodies to the point where they've got chronic issues.
Yep.
But it's coming because they're moving their bodies at an alarmingly less rate
Yep.
than their generation before them because of all the technology we have now. And now we're going to have self-driving cars and e-bikes and all these things that these are just little things that add up. So the chronic issues that we were seeing in people in their 50s are seeing in the 40s. Those in the 40s are now in the 30s. Heck, we're getting teenagers with this low back issues and so on, but we're not being trained or educated on the proper programming to meet the needs of today's population. And therefore, you've got these trainers that are coming in all bright-eyed and, oh, I've learned these programs, these are great, and they feel good to me because I've been in shape and I've been doing
Right.
this. And then I
Right.
give it to a client, and now they're complaining, I've hurt them. Oh my God, I'm the worst trainer. It's things like that I think we need to address as well.
And the problem that we end up facing is like you had said, they're not prepared coming out of the systems that are in place already. And that's what I want to dive into. And the hope is, at the end of this, I'm going to give my system that I've created in terms of everything from programming to the thought processes to how I'm integrating, fascial systems, my warm up, and why you would use it versus FMS versus something that the NASM textbook says. The hope is to give thought process, or the opportunity, to ignite that thought process is the right wording, to allow someone to have their own system created, but using the concepts that are out in the world, right? Thinking beyond just, here's this textbook, memorize the textbook, good luck. You know as well as I do, you can't, the human body is so variable, you can't look at it like that. And you hit the nail on the head with the fact of, our populace is moving, and who, A, we're training, B, has the money to train, right? Um, so our knowledge and the way we look at the body has to train as well. And realistically, I think at some level, for me, it came from my education from Loren, from listening to him, in terms of how he worked with athletes. So I took that mindset and now applied it to the human body for a 45, 50, 55-year-old adult, and the way he moved people, or moved us as athletes, the way he integrated injury prevention or resiliency. Why aren't we doing that as a 50-year-old or 55-year-old? And it's just coming out. Like knees over toes guy was a big one, right? He talks about it, but there's no real implementation. So it's hopefully applying those concepts in a more tangible way, because let's face it, I've been to the summits enough. There's so much incredible information from some of the world's best coaches, but there's no way to digest it. So there's no way to take it in. Like, you could be teaching, the most incredible thing about foot pathology, and I'm sitting there going, cool, I don't know how to apply that to Deborah. Like,
Mm.
my 55-year-old woman who's angry at me that her son was late to school today, but she needs this because her ankle buckles, and in turn she's got a lower back problem that L5 is. Well, how do we integrate that into our world? And I think it's something that's missing as well at these summits, that I'm going to try and help approach, to get our coaches to think like therapists and our therapists to think like coaches, because that's the biggest problem. You have these
That's
special
good.
you have these specialties, and you being such a multifaceted coach, you're not one. But if you step back again, zoom out, You have like your stereotypical bodybuilding coach who do nothing in terms of physical therapy. You have a physical therapist who, the minute they leave physical therapy, I did a little bit of a study on this, and basically they say within 8 to 12 months you'll see it's up to 68% of the population go back for the same thing to a physical therapist. Why? That tells
Right?
me the physical therapist, yes, you might fix the injury in the moment, but you did not fix the system. You have to look
No.
at it now like a coach. And I understand there's only so much you can do with time, with insurances and things like that. But this is the dichotomy of like, we're only ever doing pieces of it. And everyone's so glued to their one way, their one methodology. No one looks at it like a whole. And the only people who really lose are the clients, right? Um, yeah.
I love
So,
it. I love it because here's the thing, and this is what I hear you saying, and it's something that has resonated with me for many, many years now. Regardless of where I go for my knowledge and conferences, because there's some amazing, amazing conferences aside from the ones we've already spoken of. But every time I go, I'm going with the mindset that I'm going to try and achieve an understanding of the concept of what they're trying to share rather than going to a conference for the cool exercises. Because in my early years through the 90s of being a trainer, I would come back from conferences bringing these really cool exercises to my
yep,
clients because, oh man, that's going to really work them. They're going to hate me, but they're going to love me at the same time. They always couldn't stand when I went away to conferences because that meant when I come back, they're going to get an ass kicking with their workouts. It's just kind of like that. So that promoted it even more. And then again, it comes back to perform better. When I first got there, I'm like, holy cow, I need to understand the concept of movement because once I understand how this joint behaves or that joint behaves, then I can see it. And if it's missing, then I can create my own process, my own exercise. So
correct.
it's really I'm going for the concept. And when I understand that, then I can create different things. So, like we spoke NSCA this summer, I'll be
Yep,
there. And one of my presentations is creating your own screening and assessment process. It's like
perfect.
if there's plenty of amazing screens out there, and I'm friends with a whole bunch of the guys that developed them, and they
Yep,
are the most brilliant. I love being the dumbest guy in the room, and when it comes to those type of things, I feel like I'm the dumbest
yep,
guy in the room, and I absolutely love those moments. But they have developed some of the most amazing screening processes. But unless you understand the concept behind the screen, then you're just a lemming running off the cliff wherever they tell you to go. It's like,
yep,
here, follow this poster. You don't have to understand it. Just if they score here, then you do this. Well, I want to know why I'm doing that. So it's the why, right?
correct.
It's the constant why. So I
I
love
love
that
that.
that's what you're doing.
What sparked you in terms of wanting to start to tackle the movement screening concept? What sparked that in you?
Well, what sparked it in me, to be honest, was I had been studying the importance of structural alignment from the mid 90s into the 2000s. And I had my first mentor who worked with Pete Egoscu at his clinic in San Diego for some time and branched away on his own. And he became my first teacher, and forever I'll be grateful because
Hmm.
he pulled back the blinds of program design in the 90s, which was primarily borrowed from bodybuilding, which can be
Yep,
amazing, but it's not necessarily carries over into everyday movement.
correct.
And so as you only trained isolating the body, it developed improper patterns. So all of my clients were beginning to have these orthopedic concerns with they didn't have prior to training. Now their elbow was bothering them or their lower back or their knee or wherever it was. And he revealed to the fact that the programs they were designing were driving them out of alignment and therefore creating compensations, which brought about these symptoms. And it blew me away. And I could have left right there going, oh my God, I'm hurting my clients. They have no idea what I'm doing. But instead, I'm like, I want to know what to do. And so it was that. So then I realized, okay, resting posture is there is an ideal. There is a true, like there is something to
Neutral.
compare. There is,
Hmm.
yeah, there is the holy grail from which I can overlay my clients and find out where are they migrating
Right.
away from? What is missing? And then, but that wasn't enough because we didn't really bring in human movement. It was just how they stood like a tree, which was great insight and great information. But then I go, well, I want more. I want to know how is this supposed to happen when they move through space. So then Gary Gray and Gary Ward and a whole bunch of others
Yep.
came into effect, Eric Cobb and neurology and all this to show me, okay, this is their resting posture and this is the ideal. What's missing? Okay, so what's the ideal with human movement? Oh, gait, human gait mechanics is the most common way in which we move. So to finish the answer your question, I found the two absolutes that I could compare against. And when I looked at the other assessments and screening process, I realized that they had a purpose, but ultimately it wasn't necessarily as informing to me as just understanding resting posture and human gait mechanics. So I love the screening process. I learned a lot through TPI, FMS, the
Yep.
Gray Institute. I followed those screens like any move to perform, the Y
Yep.
balance, like any screen you could get. I studied and studied and started doing with those. And then I came back to the basics. I had to go through that journey to come back around to how does somebody
That's where I'm
stand
at.
and how
That's
do they
really cool.
walk.
So
It's really cool.
my question for you is, and I don't mean to dive too much into specifically your topic, so we have
Go,
to see it
baby.
in person. But my question to you is, a lot of the other screenings, obviously I'll use FMS as an example. Originally was created for college level baseball, so it was originally founded or thought about in a way for someone who has already an elite level of movement. How, if you were talking to a new trainer, someone just coming about, how do you recommend starting off their own assessments that it is appropriate for the 55-year-old with knee pain and the blah, 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 that has just a limited range? Like, how do you start to go about crafting
I try to keep it simple, and we look to the pelvis
something? Okay.
because sitting just in front of that pelvic bowl is the center of mass, and where the three planes of motion converge is right there at what we call the center of mass. And like the hub of a bicycle wheel, you have spokes that emanate out, and when those spokes have perfect balance, the wheel is true and you have a perfect unhindered ride. It's smooth all the way through. So why don't we start at the beginning, start at the center, not look at the feet, but let's just, the pelvis can, if we want a simple screening process, how do they tilt the pelvis forward and backwards? Just looking at that, how do they keep their body balanced? And are they able to do that? What's missing? How are they able to move the pelvis in balance in
Yep.
the frontal plane? So tilting on one side, tilting on the other. Is it even? Is there a difference? If there's a difference, it gives you information. If it's even,
Hmm.
it gives you information. And then lastly, how well does it rotate on the axis and the transverse plane? Is it even? Do they do it in the same way? So there's three movements. That's it. That can tell you a tremendous amount as we understand how every joint should behave through the system when the pelvis does
Yeah.
this or when the pelvis does that. So then we explore that and we get into, we open up not a can of worms, but we dive deeper into it,
Can of
right?
worms. Yeah.
Right.
That's
So it's
awesome.
it's those type of things, but you got to start somewhere. And the human body, with its 360 joints, 600 plus muscles, and just the fascial trains and all that, you can become paralyzed with your way of analysis. So
Yeah.
when I find myself getting paralyzed, I step back, I take a breath, and I go back to the basics. What's the pelvis doing? Where is it in space? All right, if it's hiked on the left, what position can I do to encourage it to be hiked on the right and give them something different? So it's those type of things that we begin to explore, and we keep it really basic.
And
It's
you
going
get
to be
simple.
one,
And I think that's
yeah.
the biggest thing is you get simple with it. That's in a world that is, like you said, you become paralyzed with the fascial systems, like all of that. It's, you keep it simple. Love that.
Yeah, because then you can start building out from there. But if you start with, oh my gosh, like
Yep.
gait analysis, anybody that says they do gait analysis, honestly, I've got to question them. I'm not going to call BS, but really, you're going to analyze 360 joints, most of which move through three-dimensional planes simultaneously in less than 1 second, because the entire gait cycle is zero point 0.6 to 0.85 seconds. And in that time, you've got so much movement. Are you going to really tell me you know how to analyze all that? There's only a few in
with
the world that
with
can really do
with your
that.
eye,
With
just
your
eyeing
eyes.
it, right?
With your eyes. I'm like,
With
so
no
don't,
equipment.
yeah, don't throw that under the, yeah. So anyway,
Okay, cool.
so give me a background. We didn't do a background story about like superhero origin of Josh Haig.
Yeah. So realistically, do you want the superhero origin of just me, or kind of where the company started? What's best?
Yeah, like what inspired for me? I just liked being in a gym because it was a good means of procrastinating, and I could count to 10 and lift heavy shit and put it up and down. And then somebody told me I could teach somebody how to count to 10 and lift heavy stuff. So that's how it started. But honestly, it wasn't because of an injury. Like a lot of my guests come on, physical
Right,
therapists, athletic trainers, strength coaches, they got injured and then somebody took them under their
right.
wing. They loved the process and they went from there. For me, I always liked solving puzzles. And so the human body is one of the most amazing puzzles to solve. And so every day I get to do puzzles,
Yeah.
and that's it. So
So
how did you get inspired?
realistically, um, I had moved out to LA a little while ago, back 2013, to be a chef. Actually, I was a trained chef, and I was coming
Me
through
too.
food and like, here we go, baby. And I was staging at a place, and I got the job, and I'm standing there like looking around. I'm like, I don't want to be in a box the rest of my life. So now I work in gyms, right? But but I didn't want to work in a box. So I was like, okay, well, what else could I do? And honestly, I struggled out here in LA to try and find a job. And I was waiting tables. And one day I was working out with my brother, getting him kind of up on his feet. And everyone kept asking me questions. And they kept coming up to me and were just like, and I was a bad trainer. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just the bodybuilding athlete football guy. And eventually the one guy at the 24-hour fitness was like, hey, you want to get paid to do this? I'm like, absolutely. And then from there, kind of we're going to jump a couple steps. I ended up working at a Velocity, and then through a series of events, I went to an NSCA event, and it was as I was 24. I was still a young gun, and realistically, I was one of. There's a great picture of it. I was one of Loren Landau's like demo people that he did a practical movement assessment, like D-cell, X-cell, drilling. And it was at a time where I was just trying to figure out my name and all of this, and I flipped out and I got the opportunity with him, and I got a call from him like 4 months later of like, hey, I don't know if this is up your alley, because I had been working a coach out here. Someone had basically seen me working out and whatnot. I was like, why aren't you playing football still? What's going on? And I went D3. I got hurt. I didn't get any drafting or anything like that. But I was like, you know what? All right, I'll try and make it. So Loren called me like 4 months later and was like, hey, I've got this spot in a draft prep class. Come on out to Colorado. Come work with our squad. Come work with the Broncos. Like, let's see what you got. And I went out. I packed everything up in my car and I went out, and it was one of the most transformative couple months of my life. I never quite made it. I was what you call a cusp person. But I went there and then to Detroit, and then tried out at Detroit. It didn't work. It's okay, because while I was there, I knew I needed a job after all of this. So what I did was I would shadow Loren, and I would go to this place called Resilience Code, and basically that's Dr. Pressmack, the neurosurgeon from the Broncos, had opened that. And basically, I was standing there with a notebook, and I'm writing down all the workouts Loren was having us do. And when he was doing table work, I was absorbing it as much as I could. And when I finished my stint trying to make it my career, I stepped back with this incredible elite level knowledge from coaches like you, right? Just world renowned in each of their practices. And I'm like, why don't we do this in the everyday life? We have gyms and we work out and we see a masseuse once in a while, but no one has this health practice. No one has a coordinated front in terms of their overall wellness. And basically, I tenfolded, I doubled down, tripled down on that kind of knowledge base, and I became that expert. So studied different physical therapy methodologies, right? Fascial systems, movement systems, and basically became this elite level knowledge in what I do and grew my team. So now we don't have a brick and mortar in LA. We're all remote. We travel to you, and we are what you consider a wellness system, a wellness company that you get our kind of services. And all of that, from physical therapy to sports performance to nutritional services, all of it, right? And that's where kind of I come at this project coordinator mindset, is because realistically, that's what I was shown. The best athletes in the world. These are the guys, man, right? Hell, when I was there, Von Miller was there, Christian McCaffrey, Dylan Cole, like legendary athletes. This is the way they were treated. Why can't Deborah, who's 55, trying to run a Spartan race next weekend, be treated the same way, just at her level? No, she's not going to be doing a 50-inch vertical, but like, why can't we change the game in terms of the way we think about the human body for the average Joe? And that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, so how does that work, Josh? I mean, are you like a concierge and you have networks of professionals, and then you're just like, here's this physical therapy facility. Look, I want to generate some clientele, patient load for you, and here's a chiropractor. There's a local nutritionist, private chef, dietitian, and so on. So you hand select in a region for a
I
client,
opened,
or
I do it all except the chiropractic part of it. Anything beyond low level physical therapy, I will send to a health practitioner, a specific, like anything that's beyond. And it's hard because it depends on the scope of the injury, right? I specialize in spines and shoulders. And so you'll see me, I work with actually a lot of regenerative medicine places will refer me, their people, to do the therapy in terms of spines and shoulders. But I have a nutritionist on staff. I had a life coach for a long while. I opened a meal prep company that I cooked for them, that I had an executive chef on staff that we cooked and delivered. But realistically, we are that team. I do have connections as needed. I do the bodywork manual therapy, all neuro repatterning that comes through my hands. So it's basically, I became this Swiss Army knife of fitness. That through different practitioners, I studied behind them. I went and, sitting there while Loren Landow was doing table work on Derek Wolf, watching him manipulate, doing MAT. I studied MAT. Like, all of a sudden now I grew this immense level of knowledge. So that's what the clients have access to. That's my.
got it. All right. So it's definitely regional, although yeah, I'm sure there's some virtual stuff, but you're limited with the virtuality of it because the hands-on aspect
Yep.
and maybe the food service itself. But okay,
The,
first I need to go ahead.
You said timeout. You got it. Go ahead.
Well, okay. I just need to. Loren's been brought up several times in this conversation, and for listening audience, if you're not familiar with Loren Landow, I don't know where you've been, but Loren's a dear friend of mine. We've become really close over the last few years. Actually, we're kind of accountability partners. Just before he took this job, he's been with the Denver Broncos for many, many years. When the coaching change happened about a year ago, they said goodbye to Loren there, but wouldn't you know it, he was going to go
You went
back
to
to
Notre
his
Dame.
Lando performance right out in Denver, but Notre Dame gave him a call. So wouldn't you know, instead of working with the Denver Broncos, he's the head strength conditioning coach of Notre Dame football. Oh, and by the way, yeah, they went to the national championship this year, right? So Loren, and that brother, he is so busy. I thought my life was busy. It's like we try and text each other on a weekly basis, but that's just it's really hard to nail him down these days. But now, maybe in the off season, I'm gonna reach out to him actually when we get off here, and I'm gonna go, dude. Come on, let's do another podcast, because if you can go in the archives, we've had one conversation before, but we presented at conferences together. In fact, he's got, for those talking about conferences, Sportsmith is now coming to the US. It's normally in Europe. Talk about performance level presenters. Loren's going to be one of the presenters there at the end of June in Los Angeles. So check out Sportsmith. I think it's .co.
It's in Los Angeles?
It's in LA. He's coming to LA in June. So we're going to all hook up. I'm going to probably drive down and connect with him. And yeah. So, okay. Go back to it now. That's enough about Loren. Forget him. We can get him on the show next time. But talk to me more about what you're about to say.
I forget, but I'm making a note of Sportsmith. There we go.
Yeah.
We're
talking about how regional, and then how some of the things are hands-on. But
I do the coaching that I'll do, everything except the hands-on I can do remotely. The programming, things like that, obviously with technology being what it is, I'm really coming out in terms of the next kind of evolution of my coaching is going after sleep. So I'm finishing a book, basically a tangible, tactical sleep hygiene fix, as well as a supplement, and really going to try and give back-end coaching, because I feel like everyone and their brother either has sleep problems or back pain or both. So how can we start to address those two problems? So that's really what I would be talking about in terms of getting outside of regional. That's going to be my next evolution here. But for right now, yes, I would say most likely the actual training, the actual, hands-on stuff, it's here in LA.
Right on. And
Yeah.
what's your geography or your diameter of travel, shall we say, your circumference?
We go Malibu to downtown, Valley to Manhattan Beach. So it's a pretty large grid. I geolocate trainers all over LA. Basically, you can just draw a big circle and drop it.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay, and now of course you just bring up Malibu and all that. So I got to ask about the fires, and because I'm sure you just got inundated with people. I mean, I live 6 hours north of you by a car. If you're having a good time driving up, and all relatives and people that have no idea about California geography, are you okay? Yeah, we're fine up here. But how are you, man? How was it for you?
It was scary. It was hard.
No kidding.
I am personally safe. I'm good. I had a lot of clients hit hard.
Ah,
Lost their houses. Like it's one of the major areas that, like, since I started training, I've had people out there that I've watched them grow a family in some of these houses. It's been very difficult. Thankfully, the city has really pulled together. Interestingly enough, it's gotten very quiet. It's everything happened. You know, the world's changing, and then it like leveled out. So it's there. You don't hear much about it unless you are directly affected right now or in an industry like building or permitting or things like that where you need to be directly related to it. But everyday conversations, life, you don't hear much about it. Crazily enough. However, I am safe. I had no one in the company, was hurt or anything of the sort. So we're very thankful.
well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. And so, you mentioned, back into our topics here,
Yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
that you primarily focus, or you specialize, shall we say, spine and shoulders. How did that come about? Was that an organic thing, or you're like, oh, the shoulder's most an amazing joint. Oh, but you look at that, how it's connected to the spine. Oh, that's awesome. Then you just go in there. How did it happen?
So that's the secondary step. The first step was I tore almost all of my shoulder apart, 75% of my rotator cuff, all the labrum, all the caps
Wow.
gone, and I don't have
Go
a
getter.
teres.
Way
I
to
don't have
go,
a
man. You go for it.
so I had it completely rebuilt. And through my career doing the football, try for the NFL, I have hurt, torn, snapped, popped, all sorts of different things. And realistically, I'm like you said, I'm a puzzle guy. I like to rebuild, and I'm a healer, so I've rebuilt things. And like then part B is as I figured out the shoulder, I realized that as my spine got more mobility, my shoulder was in less pain. Well, I wonder why that is. Oh, if I fix my breathing mechanics, oh wait, well then I go down to my pelvis, and so all of a sudden, over the years, it's like, huh, I can fix both of these kind of interchangeably, and I've noticed then on top of that, as the business mind, that most people have back pain, and with that comes either shoulder or hips. Most likely shoulder, because as the spine loses mobility, the shoulder is unable to do its job, right? Um, and then so it was okay, how can I create an elite level knowledge of understanding about the system, how it works, integrating movement into it. So it's funny that I laugh when I say it, when I talk to some of the people. It's like when I get these practitioners that will refer me, the regenerative medicine people, I laugh, and when I'm on the phone the first time, because they're like, "Who are you? You're just a trainer," and I'm like, "I'm the guy you see when physical therapy and surgery hasn't worked, and you're still in pain. That's when you find me." And all of a sudden, you'll really resonate to this, where it's, I'm in pain here, and I had this surgery, and I can't bend this way, and then all of a sudden, I'm looking at their gait, I'm looking at their heel of their foot, and all of a sudden, you change small little tension lines through the body, and it's like everything fixes. Then it's
Okay.
now their pain-free movement. I've had such tremendous results in terms of mixing that therapy side of things with strength training, and then the counter side to it is what I say, the table work, and it's everything from Graston and other instruments through like gua sha, through like I call it neuro repatterning, where you're actually taking them through like an MAT style activation, push pull, PNF system or PNF concepts as you're moving them through different patterns. So it's kind of like a handshake between therapy, strength training, and like body work. And man, it works wonders for people.
And that resonates completely with me, first of all, and when even the conversation that people is they're like, wait a minute, what do you do? You're a trainer? Like, how do you know this stuff kind of thing? Like, that completely resonates with me to the point where it's really hard to say that I'm a personal trainer because it just creates a certain connotation or image in somebody's mind. So, movement investigator these days is kind of what I'm
Ooh,
going with. A
ooh,
movement investigator, what does that mean? Well, I hunt down the clues in your body to figure out why things are going the way they are. I'm just like, I
yeah,
investigate. It's just
yeah.
like a detective in a way. But and let me just get my train of thought back with that. The body, oh crap,
Movement
it's
investigator.
lost.
I resonated. You
Yes.
resonated with it. I don't know. It's just, and I
Oh,
think
this is
that's
it. This is it. Thank you for that. I got it. I had to go back into the room where I was to remember I was looking for my keys. You know how that is. Anyway,
good.
so hands on. That's
Yeah.
what I wanted to talk about. Is that uh, in our industry, we are told, and maybe it's changing because it's been a while since I asked somebody, that it's a hands off. Trainers are meant to be hands off. And I've got some local professionals that are in the therapy industry here that were questioning. Like, my company is called Rehab Fitness and Conditioning. And they're like, oh, I would watch out about using that word rehab. But really, by definition, it's exactly what we do. So the question is like, these things that are at the end of my wrists are really one of the most powerful tools, combined with my eyes, that I could ever have. Forget whatever is in the gym. As long as I have these two things, I'm going to be pretty good. But the industry is saying, well, wait a minute. It's a hands-off industry, but how can it be a hands-off industry if you're spotting clients, if you're assisting stretching, if all that, you know what I'm trying to get at?
So, awesome question. So, realistically, I think it's one of the biggest flaws that are in our system as a whole. Like, but they created it as guidelines because let's face it, we've all worked with that one trainer. For those listening, right, that one coach that they should never be touching somebody, and how did they even get certified, right? But on the
Right.
other hand, for an elite level practitioner, at the point where you're going to see me, if I'm actually working with you here in LA, and we're at the point where I'm going to touch something or fix something, there's an innate level of trust. You also are at a point where you're looking for anything, right? I'm not just doing it to the average Joe walking around. I mitigate your own risk. And I will also, I'll be honest, I tell them very point blank up front, I am not a massage therapist. You understand this, and they sign a very intense waiver of like, you understand what you're getting at, but I also am a pro at what I do. And if you want to be out of pain, hell, and if you'd like a massage therapist, I have one to recommend if you want to certify. So there's like a dance to go through with it, and there's like
Yeah.
vetting process for those listening. If you are inexperienced, if you've not really studied, and I put in definitely over 1,000 hours in terms of studying people, going to classes. Like, I've learned the practice, right? It's not just like I'm guessing out there, but it's something where if you're inexperienced or you don't know what you're doing, you should not do it, right? So you have to be that gauge. It is high risk, but in the same vein, the evolution of what we do, the true summation to truly help someone. Manual therapy, manual manipulation has to be a part of it. And a manipulation can be something that's helping them sit back their shoulder in the girdle as they're going through a pressing motion. So it's something
Yeah.
where manual is a very vague term. Okay, deep tissue massage, and you're up in their crotch, and you're doing okay. That's not for everybody. However, helping assisted stretching, if you know what you're doing and you've practiced and learned, yeah, you should be able to do that. So,
Yeah.
in my opinion, I think it's a very outdated and flawed system. However, at the end of the day, it was originally created to basically put a blanket across and say, though, like, now no one can do it except those we certify, but also make money on. So it's like,
Right.
I
I think it's a game of semantics these days. So, for
correct.
instance, like, there's some words that are poison that I will never spout, and that is
Hmm.
therapy. Like, I don't say we're doing any form of therapy. I'm not a therapist. Um, and diagnose? No, I am
Okay, yeah,
not
that's a big one.
qualified to be a diagnostician. Right? I do not diagnose. And treat. Those are the
Yeah,
three words you'll never hear me say. I don't treat. I don't do therapy and I don't diagnose, but we can explore. And if there's an area in your body that needs to be cuddled, give it a little cuddle, give it a little push here and there. Maybe this is a little restrictions. Let's see if we can free it up and then see what happens. Let it go back into your system and see what happens. That's a common phrase that I'll use is,
Yeah.
okay, go ahead, walk around, see what happens. How does that
Yeah.
feel? Right? It's those type of things. So I'm glad we're so aligned with so many things. It's not funny. But
I
anyway,
think you probably have a network of people that, let's say, a client comes in and it's more than a coddling, it's more than a little bit. You probably have someone that you can say, hey, you got to go talk. You
oh
go
yeah,
talk to this person. They're going to set you up, and then they'll fire back whatever the treatment protocol is. That's the
yeah,
way I work with these different doctors. That
beautiful.
they're my people. Like, I never diagnose. If it's like, I think
No.
you might have a rotator cuff tear. Let's get you an MRI. Let's look at it. Let's send you to the proper practitioner. Like, yeah, but I'm never going to say, oh, that's a rotator cuff tear. Yeah. No, no, no,
Well,
no.
that's a good point. Actually, that's a really good point. So and we're both do the same thing, and probably end on this, and then I want to get some
Of course.
contact information, social media, and so on. But it is creating the network of professionals in your region, whether it's geographic region or it could be virtual, whatever nowadays. But with a client, I'll say, hey, I want you to go see your doctor, and then if you don't mind, I would like you to provide them permission to share information with me,
Correct.
right? And I want you to go see this physical therapist or this massage therapist, this Pilates instructor, or this nutritionist. But please give them permission. Those that are under the HIPAA laws, please provide them inside information because I want to create a team to surround you and the things that we're trying to address. And if everyone is working with you but not talking with one another,
What's the
that's
point?
not going to be as good as if we have a cooperative team that communicates and understands. And so I'm not the end all be all. Maybe I can be a big component of it, but I know for a fact that there's others in this area that can easily help and enhance what we're doing. So there you go.
Even though you might not be the end all and be all, if you can be the person at the end of the day, I say project coordinator, but the person to gather the data. A lot of the times what I'm seeing is the chiropractor sees one thing, doctor sees one thing, you see another. No one ever steps back and says, what are all these similarities? What are the differences and why? And that's what's missing from the client's success. They go see the doctor and they fix one piece of it, but then something else goes wrong because the chiropractor is trying to work on one thing. And now all of a sudden everything is always off kilter. And it's just this endless cycle where the minute you can coagulate that data, you said you hit the nail on the head, ask your other practitioners to give permission, and you become that central data point. Because what also will happen is your clients are they're vulnerable, they are scared, they're fearful, and so they're looking for someone to trust. And realistically, if you have that level of knowledge, now if you don't, and you're a young trainer coming up in the industry, leave it to the professionals. But if you're a more senior person, such as yourself, such as myself, the client feels lost in this world of guessing to get out of pain. All they want is to be done with pain. So if you can help guide them and be there for them, it will do substantially more psychosomatic. If we're even looking at pain response to it, just feeling like they have an answer will help their pain. And you can be that person, as you say, ooh, he said this, we should think about this. This one said this, so let's think about that. And it helps them navigate the uncertainty.
Right on, man.
Yeah.
So okay, I can't believe we're at near the top of the hour here.
I know.
How can people follow you? Maybe even if they're looking for services in the LA area
Yeah.
or outside of that, how do they get a hold of you?
So my website, heroicperformance.net, is going to be where we, you can see just who I am and what I'm about. Heroic_performance is going to be my Instagram. And then we're up on YouTube at Heroic Performance for any sort of, like, I give, workouts and you don't say therapy, but I'll say rehab or prehab is up there, things like that to help you with some tactical stuff as well. So I'm all up there. Yeah.
And then, well, of course, you can go to performbetter.com and check out the 3-day summit that'll be happening. That's middle of July in Long Beach, where Josh is going to be. So, man, thank you so much for this time. I love having this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Rocky. It has been an absolute pleasure. I can't thank you enough.
And that's a wrap for another episode of the Zelos podcast. Thank you, Josh, for coming on, man. What a great conversation. Hope everyone got something out of that. And remember, you can go to my website for blogs, podcast archives, of course, CEU courses, and just maybe a little insight from what I do. RockySnyder.com. Don't forget, PerformBetter.com, the 3-day functional summit happening in LA, Chicago, and Providence. Go to one or all of them. And while you're on it, NSCA National Conference, July 16th to 19th this year, Kansas City, Missouri. And check out my book, Return to Center, while you're at it. If you got insomnia, having trouble sleeping, this might help.